Hi, I'm Cam Weiland, and welcome to this week's Writing Q&A. This week's question is from Emilius Lives, and he asks, speaking of characters, because that's what we talked about last week, I've been meaning to ask you for your opinion or perhaps technique on this, character naming. I always thought everything can be our means of expression, and character names should and could mean something. A friend of mine opposes this completely and picks random names off the phone book. He thinks naming a character something relevant or specific is as bad as giving them Snow White dwarves names, Sleepy, Bashful, etc. Of course, that's an extreme example, and I wouldn't go that far, but I think it's important to give characters a meaningful name, even if only I know the meaning. Otherwise, it's a wasted opportunity for expression. Leaving something like that to chance isn't something a creative person would want. So, this seems like this is my answer every week, but it's subjective. It totally depends at the end of the day, first and foremost, on what the author wants to do. If that's meaningful to you, if that's important, then totally go that route. It also depends to some degree on your genre, what you're writing, the tone of your story. I think you can obviously go to like the extreme with this and name characters things that are obviously punny or have an obvious meaning. Charles Dickens was noted for this. J.K. Rowling did this notoriously and very well on the whole, creating names that in some instances were really on the nose, but in other instances just sort of evoked what she wanted them to, like say Voldemort with Mort in there, evoking death. So you could totally go that route, and that's fun and can add an extra layer to your story depending on what you're doing. Generally, that's only going to work if you're writing something that's fun and playful or a little tongue-in-cheek or satirical, kind of like what Terry Pratchett does in his stories. And you can also go just a little subtler with this, and I think that's kind of what the question is pointing to, of the names having meaning, but they're not necessarily on the nose or completely obvious to readers. This was something that I kind of did in my Gaslamp Fantasy Wayfarer, which was set in Georgian England. And so I was kind of paying ode to Charles Dickens, who is one of my favorite authors. And I sewed a lot of minor characters in the story had names that were from minor characters in Dickens's story. And I wanted it to be kind of this Easter egg where if people were familiar with Dickens, they might pick up on it and notice. But the names were from really minor characters, so they're not something that most readers are going to immediately notice or hopefully feel like, oh, she's really saying that this is supposed to be Dickens' character, which was totally not what I was doing. It was just like a little fun little homage. And you can also, something I used to do a lot was like look at meanings of names in baby name books, because that can be kind of a fun way to add secret meanings, whether your readers ever figure it out or not. But I also don't think that there's anything wrong with picking random names out of a phone book, because in real life, although I think almost all people have meaningful names, their parents or they themselves chose those names to be purposeful and to mean something and evoke something. But how we interact with those people, how we hear those names, it does seem pretty random. Like we don't know, why half the people that we even are pretty close friends with were named the way they were named. So I think more than anything, I think the most valuable thing when you're choosing to name characters is just thinking about what a name evokes. And obviously that's subjective, that's personal. You might know someone named John who you really hated, and so that name is horrible for you. But not everyone is going to have that connotation. I do think it's important, though. I mean, if you're writing a character with a name that evokes someone you really don't like, that's probably going to subtly sneak into your writing. So that's definitely something to think about. But again, genre has a lot to do with it. Fantasy genres generally have wild made up names. Romance sometimes has highly romantic names where everybody has this really flowery name, and that's not going to happen in real life, but that's kind of part of the genre and it works. And other genres that are like hard-boiled or hyper-realistic, they want to have like really mundane names where it's not something interesting or exciting, but just a really super normal name like Sam or John or something like that. So at the end of the day, I really think this is very, very much a personal decision and what feels right to you. But yeah, if you want to bring in interesting meanings and entendres, if you yourself are the only one who knows that, I think it's still a fun and meaningful thing. But if you want it to be something that readers are going to notice, I do think then you have to really think about the effect it's having on the overall story and what's appropriate for the tone and genre that you're writing. So that was a fun question. Thank you for asking. And if you would like me to answer your question in next week's video, leave it in the comments below. Please consider liking the video to let YouTube's algorithm know that you liked it. And be sure to stop by my website, helpingwritersbecomeauthors.com. I post lengthy posts on writing technique and story theory every Monday.